I'm Madison Reynolds, 32, a financial analyst in Boston who spent months saving $7,000 for a dream family vacation to Hawaii. I remember that moment so clearly, calling home excited about our upcoming trip, only to hear my mother casually say, "The whole family went last week." My heart stopped. The vacation I had planned and paid for, they'd gone without me. Being the middle child, I've always tried to prove my worth, but nothing prepared me for this betrayal. Before I share how this unfolded, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most. Growing up in Fairfield, Connecticut, my position in the family was always clearly defined. My parents, Jeffrey and Elizabeth Reynolds, ran a successful insurance agency together, providing us with a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. Our colonial-style home, with its meticulously maintained lawn and white picket fence, projected the perfect family image, but appearances can be deceiving. My older brother Brandon, now 35, was always the golden child. From the moment he was born, my parents treated him like their greatest achievement. Every baseball game, every school award ceremony, they were front row, beaming with pride. His room was plastered with trophies and certificates that my parents would proudly show to any visitor. "Brandon's going to run the family business someday," my father would announce, even when we were kids. Then there's my younger sister Caitlin, 27, the baby of the family. Beautiful, carefree, and effortlessly charming, she could wrap anyone around her finger with a smile. When she decided to pursue art rather than a practical career, my parents supported her without question, funding her apartment in New York and her studio space while she found herself. Her creativity was celebrated, her impulsivity excused as artistic temperament. And then there was me, Madison, the middle child. The responsible one. The one who never caused trouble. The one who was expected to achieve, but received minimal acknowledgement when I did. I learned early that in order to receive even a fraction of the attention my siblings got effortlessly, I needed to work twice as hard. My academic achievements were always framed as expected rather than exceptional. When I graduated as valedictorian of my high school class, my mother's response was, "Well, you've always been studious." The praise was always qualified, always measured. My father nodded approvingly, but quickly shifted the conversation to Brandon's new job opportunity. College was my first taste of independence. I attended Boston University on a partial scholarship, working 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore to cover additional expenses. My parents contributed what they called their fair share, though it was notably less than what they provided for my siblings. Brandon had received a full ride to his university, while Caitlin's art school tuition was paid in full despite its exorbitant cost. During those college years, I discovered my aptitude for finance. Numbers made sense to me in a way people often didn't. They were consistent, reliable, and rewarded precision and attention to detail, all qualities I had cultivated growing up as the overlooked middle child. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance, landing an entry-level position at Meridian Financial Partners, a prestigious firm in Boston. The early years of my career were challenging. I lived in a tiny apartment with 2 roommates, working 60-hour weeks while slowly climbing the corporate ladder. Each promotion was hard-earned, each raise carefully saved and invested. When I called home with news of my accomplishments, the conversations were brief and often redirected to family matters, or my siblings' latest adventures. Despite the emotional distance, I never stopped seeking my parents' approval. It was like a thirst I couldn't quench. I'd send thoughtful gifts for birthdays and anniversaries. I'd make the 3-hour drive home for weekend visits whenever I could spare the time. I'd listen patiently to lengthy updates about Brandon's growing family or Caitlin's latest art exhibition, waiting for the moment they might ask about my life. 5 years into my career, I was able to buy my own condominium, a modern one-bedroom, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River. I invited my family for a housewarming dinner, spending days preparing and decorating. My mother walked through the space with a tight smile, commenting that it was certainly modern, in a tone that suggested this wasn't a compliment. My father asked about the mortgage terms and seemed disappointed when I explained I had secured an excellent rate. Later, I overheard him telling Brandon, "She's always been good with her money, but it's a shame she's so focused on work. No balance in her life." That night, after they left, I stood at my window looking out at the twinkling city lights, wondering why my achievements always felt hollow when reflected in my parents' eyes. Still, I persisted. Perhaps it was stubbornness, or perhaps a deep-seated hope that someday I would do something that would make them truly see me. By my 30th birthday, I had established myself as one of the top financial analysts at my firm. My client portfolio was impressive, my investment strategies consistently yielding results above market averages. I had found my niche in sustainable investing, helping clients grow their wealth while supporting environmentally and socially responsible companies. It was fulfilling work that allowed me to align my values with my professional expertise. That's when the promotion came senior investment strategist, with a substantial salary increase and bonus structure. After years of careful budgeting and modest living, I suddenly had more financial flexibility than ever before. As I sat in my office late one evening, staring at the official offer letter, a thought occurred to me. Perhaps this was my opportunity to finally bridge the gap with my family. Not through another achievement they would minimize, but through an experience we could share together. A memory we could create collectively. The idea of a family vacation took root and quickly blossomed. Not just any vacation, but something extraordinary, the kind of trip my parents had always talked about, but never prioritized. For years, my mother had mentioned wanting to see Hawaii, sighing over travel magazines featuring palm-fringed beaches and spectacular sunsets. Someday, she would say, closing the glossy pages with a wistful expression. I decided that someday would be now, and I would make it happen. Not just for my mother, but for all of us. A chance to reconnect away from the usual dynamics and patterns. A gift that showed my love and appreciation for my family, despite our complicated relationship. A perfect opportunity to finally feel like I truly belonged. Little did I know that this generous gesture would become the catalyst for the most painful revelation about my place in my family. Sometimes the gifts we give reveal truths we aren't prepared to face. The morning after receiving my promotion, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. This vacation wouldn't just be a trip. It would be the ultimate gesture to show my family how much they meant to me. Over my morning coffee, I opened my laptop and began researching Hawaiian destinations, feeling a surge of excitement with each gorgeous image that appeared on my screen. After comparing the different islands, I settled on Maui. It offered the perfect blend of relaxation and adventure that would appeal to everyone in my family. My father could golf on world-class courses, my mother could enjoy the luxury spas, Brandon and his wife Megan could take advantage of the romantic settings, and Caitlin would appreciate the artistic culture and natural beauty. And for myself, I looked forward to simply being together with my family, creating memories that weren't centered around work or obligations. I decided to keep the trip a surprise until all the details were finalized. For the next 3 weeks, I spent my evenings researching resorts, reading hundreds of reviews, and comparing amenities. During my lunch breaks, I'd call different hotels and speak with their concierge services, asking detailed questions about accommodations and experiences. Eventually, I settled on the Royal Lahaina Resort, a 5-star property with ocean view rooms and a reputation for exceptional service. It was significantly more expensive than other options, but the moment I saw pictures of its private bungalows and expansive beachfront, I knew it was perfect. Each family member would have their own space while still being connected, a subtle metaphor for what I hoped to achieve with this trip. The price tag was substantial, nearly $7,000 for a week's stay including flights, but I was determined to handle it entirely on my own. This would be my gift, with no strings attached. To make it work, I implemented a strict personal budget, cutting back on everything from dining out to my monthly clothing allowance. I picked up extra projects at work that came with additional compensation. I even sold some of my investment pieces that had performed well. Every dollar saved was another step toward making this dream vacation a reality. Working with a travel agent named Diane proved invaluable. She helped me coordinate flights from Boston and Connecticut to arrive at similar times, arranged private airport transfers, and suggested a welcome package with tropical fruits and champagne to be waiting in each room upon arrival. "This is such a thoughtful gift," Diane commented during one of our planning calls. "Your family is very lucky to have you." Her words warmed me, providing validation that was often missing in my family interactions. If someone who barely knew me could recognize the thought and care behind this gesture, surely my family would too. The excursion planning was where I invested the most personal attention. I wanted each day to include activities that would appeal to individual family members, while also creating opportunities for bonding. I booked a private sailing and snorkeling trip to Molokini Crater, knowing my father and Brandon would enjoy the adventure aspect, while my mother and Caitlin would appreciate the marine life. I reserved spots at a traditional Hawaiian luau, arranged a sunrise tour of Haleakala National Park, and scheduled a private cooking class featuring local cuisine. For my father specifically, I secured tea times at the renowned plantation course at Kapalua, frequently listed among the world's best golf destinations. For my mother, I booked a series of spa treatments, including a Hawaiian lomi lomi massage she had once mentioned reading about. For Brandon and Megan, I arranged a private sunset dinner on the beach. And for Caitlin, I found a local art workshop where she could learn traditional Hawaiian techniques from native artisans. As the weeks passed and the plans solidified, my excitement grew. I started shopping for little extras, reef-safe sunscreen, high-quality beach towels, and customized water bottles for everyone. I found lightweight, packable sun hats for the women and performance sunglasses for the men. I even ordered custom photo albums with Reynolds Family Hawaiian Adventure, embossed on the covers, envisioning how we would fill them with snapshots of sun-drenched smiles and stunning landscapes. 2 months before our departure date, everything was finally arranged. I had confirmation numbers, detailed itineraries, and a folder of reservation documents neatly organized. I decided it was time to share the surprise with my family. I scheduled a Sunday dinner at my parents' house, telling them only that I had news to share. I spent hours preparing a Hawaiian-themed meal: kalua pork, macaroni salad, and fresh pineapple, as a hint toward the reveal. When the day arrived, I was practically buzzing with anticipation. I drove to Connecticut, with a car full of food and a small suitcase containing the presentation materials I'd prepared. I had created individual gift bags for each family member, each containing a folder with their personalized itinerary, a small gift related to their planned activities, and a card expressing what I hoped we would gain from this time together. My parents' house looked the same as always, a familiar sight that brought both comfort and a subtle undercurrent of tension. As I carried my supplies inside, I noticed Brandon's SUV already in the driveway. Caitlin arrived shortly after me, breezing in with her typical energy, bringing a bottle of wine and stories of her latest gallery showing. Dinner proceeded as our family gatherings typically did. My father dominated the conversation with anecdotes from work. My mother interjected with neighborhood updates. Brandon discussed his children's achievements, and Caitlin shared animated stories of city life. I waited patiently, contributing where appropriate, but saving my news for dessert. When the meal was finished and we had moved to the living room with coffee, I finally stood up, heart pounding with excitement. I have something special to share with everyone, I announced, retrieving the gift bags from where I'd hidden them in the hallway closet. 5 pairs of eyes turned to me with varying degrees of interest as I handed out the bags. "What's all this, Madison?" my mother asked, accepting her bag with a curious expression. "Open them together," I instructed, struggling to contain my smile. As they pulled out the folders and began to read the itineraries, I watched their faces carefully, waiting for the moment of realization. My father's eyebrows rose first, as he noted the resort name. My mother gasped when she saw Hawaii printed at the top of the page. "Madison," she said, looking up at me. "What is this?" "We're going to Maui," I explained, the words tumbling out in my excitement. "All of us, for a full week. Everything's arranged: flights, hotel, activities. It's my treat, a way to celebrate my promotion and spend quality time together as a family." The reactions were not quite what I had imagined. There was surprise, certainly, but it was tempered with something else. My father cleared his throat, flipping through the pages with a slight frown. "This must have cost a fortune," he commented, his tone suggesting concern rather than appreciation. "I've been saving," I assured him. "And the promotion came with a substantial bonus. I wanted to do something special for all of us." My mother was examining the spa appointments listed in her itinerary. "These dates, this is during the school year. Brandon, can you even get away from the kids for a full week?" Brandon exchanged a glance with Megan that I couldn't quite interpret. "It would take some arranging," he said carefully. "My schedule at the office is pretty tight those weeks." Caitlin was the only one who showed genuine enthusiasm, exclaiming over the art workshop and thanking me with a warm hug. Yet even her reaction seemed slightly forced, her eyes darting to our parents as if gauging their response. "I thought we could all use a real vacation," I continued, trying to recapture the joyful atmosphere I had imagined. "Mom, you've always talked about wanting to see Hawaii, and Dad, wait until you see the golf course I've booked for you." My mother smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's very generous, Madison. We'll need to check our calendars, of course. The timing might be tricky." The conversation shifted then, moving away from my gift to more routine topics. The gift bags were set aside, the itineraries tucked back into their folders. I sat there, a tight knot forming in my stomach, as I watched my carefully planned surprise being politely acknowledged, but not embraced with the excitement I had anticipated. Later, as I was loading leftovers into containers in the kitchen, my mother joined me, placing a hand on my arm. "It's a lovely thought, dear," she said softly. "But next time, perhaps check with us before making such elaborate plans. You know how your father likes to organize things himself." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course. I just wanted it to be a surprise." She patted my arm and moved away, leaving me with the distinct feeling that my grand gesture had somehow missed its mark. Still, I told myself that the initial shock would wear off, and they would come to appreciate the thoughtfulness behind the gift. After all, who wouldn't be excited about a free trip to paradise? As I drove back to Boston that evening, I rehearsed how wonderful the actual vacation would be. The minor disappointment of the reveal would be forgotten once we were watching magnificent sunsets together, or sharing laughs on a catamaran. This was just a small bump in the road to a perfect family experience. I couldn't have known then how wrong I was, or that the bump would turn into an insurmountable wall that would force me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about my family and my place within it. The week following the vacation reveal brought a strange silence from my family. I had expected follow-up questions about the trip, perhaps some excitement building as the reality of our upcoming Hawaiian adventure sank in. Instead, my messages checking in about passport expirations and dietary preferences for the luau went largely unanswered. When responses did come, they were brief and non-committal. My father texted, "We'll look into it." My mother called but spent most of the conversation talking about her garden club drama, before saying she'd get back to me about the trip details. Brandon claimed work was hectic and he'd call when things settled down. Only Caitlin engaged somewhat, asking questions about the art workshop, before mentioning she might have a gallery opportunity around the same time. 10 days after the reveal, I invited everyone to a group video call to discuss the vacation. Only my mother and Caitlin joined. Brandon texted an apology about a last-minute client emergency, and my father was apparently having computer issues. "I've emailed everyone their flight information," I explained to the partial gathering. "The airline needs final confirmation by next week." My mother nodded distractedly. "Madison, did I tell you about Mrs. Peterson's daughter? She just got engaged to that doctor she's been dating." I redirected gently. "That's nice, Mom. About the flights though?" "Oh yes," she interrupted. "Your father and I need to check a few things with our schedule. The garden club might have the annual fundraiser around then. The trip is 2 months away," I reminded her. "It's all on the itinerary I gave you." "Yes, of course," she said vaguely. "We'll sort it out." Caitlin at least acknowledged the trip directly. "The resort looks amazing, Maddie. I'm just waiting to hear back about this potential showcase. The gallery owner said it might be the same week, but is not sure yet." By the end of the call, I had no confirmations and a growing sense of unease. That night, I called my best friend Rachel, seeking reassurance. "I don't understand," I told her, pacing my apartment. "I've planned this amazing vacation, and they're acting like I've asked them to help me move." Rachel had known me since college, and understood my family dynamics better than most. "Have they always been this way about your gifts?" she asked. The question made me pause. "They're usually polite, but now that you mention it, there's often some reason why my gifts aren't quite right. Too practical, not practical enough, not their style. And when Brandon or Caitlin gives them something." I sank onto my couch as realization dawned. They act like it's the most thoughtful thing anyone has ever done, regardless of what it is. "Maddie," Rachel said gently, "I think you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that they might find some reason not to go." "But it's Hawaii," I protested. "Who turns down a free trip to Hawaii?" "People who are committed to maintaining certain family dynamics," she replied. "Your generosity challenges the roles they're comfortable with." I dismissed Rachel's concerns as overly pessimistic, but in the weeks that followed, the evidence supporting her theory mounted. My follow-up attempts were met with increasingly creative avoidance tactics. My father claimed he needed to check if his golf league had tournaments scheduled. My mother suddenly remembered a potential conflict with her volunteer work. Brandon mentioned his oldest child might have a school event, though he was trying to work around it. Caitlin's art showcase remained in limbo, a convenient uncertainty. 3 weeks before the departure date, I had yet to receive a single clear confirmation. The airline was sending reminder emails about check-in. The resort requested final confirmation of our party size. The excursion companies needed participant names and liability waivers signed. I scheduled another family dinner, determined to get definitive answers. This time, I arrived with printed boarding passes and a timeline for each person to complete the necessary pre-trip requirements. The tension was palpable as I laid out the documents on my parents' dining room table. My father cleared his throat several times before speaking. "Madison, we appreciate all this effort, but I'm not sure the timing is going to work out." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I've given everyone 2 months' notice." My mother jumped in. "It's just that so many things have come up. The garden club definitely scheduled their fundraiser that weekend. And your father's golf league? Golf league? I interrupted, frustration building. Dad, I've booked you tee times at one of the top courses in the world. Why would you choose your local league over that? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Brandon studied his water glass intently while Caitlin bit her lip and looked away. We should have discussed this sooner, my father finally said, his tone suggesting I was being unreasonable. Maybe we can look at rescheduling for later in the year. The resort is booked solid for months, I explained, trying to keep my voice level. And the rates increase significantly during high season. This was the perfect window. Well, my mother sighed, perhaps it was perfect for you, but you have to understand we all have our commitments. The dinner deteriorated from there, with vague promises to make it work, that rang hollow even as they were spoken. I drove home that night with a mounting sense of dread. Something wasn't right. Their excuses were too coordinated, their avoidance too consistent. The next morning, I called the airline to check on my family's tickets, only to discover that none of them had completed the online check-in process, required 48 hours before international flights. I then called the resort, intending to ask about late check-in options, only to have the receptionist mention something that sent a chill through me. Ms. Reynolds, I show that your party contacted us last week about some adjustments to the reservation dates. Our manager approved the change as a one-time courtesy. Would you like me to send you the updated confirmation? I gripped my phone tightly. What changes? I didn't request any changes. The receptionist paused. Oh, I apologize for the confusion. The request came from a Jeffrey Reynolds. Since it was the same last name, and he had all the reservation details, we assumed it was authorized. My father had contacted the resort behind my back. I thanked the receptionist and ended the call, my hands shaking with a mixture of confusion and anger. What exactly was going on? I tried calling each family member individually, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I sent texts asking for immediate clarification. The responses, when they finally came hours later, were frustratingly vague. Sorry, Madison was in meetings all day. Brandon. Can we talk about this on the weekend? Mother. Battery dying, we'll call later. Caitlin. No response at all from my father. That weekend, I drove to Connecticut again, unannounced this time. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, I noticed something odd. Their suitcases were in the garage, visible through the window. Large, high-quality luggage I didn't recognize, with airport tags still attached. My mother answered the door in loungewear, looking startled to see me. Madison. We weren't expecting you today. Clearly, I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Mom, why are there suitcases in the garage? Her hand fluttered to her throat, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. Oh, those. We had a church retreat last weekend. I haven't unpacked yet. But my father, coming down the stairs, wasn't prepared with the same story. Is that Madison? Good timing, we just got back yesterday, and could use some help with the... He stopped abruptly, seeing my mother's warning glance. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, searching for Caitlin's profile. She posted constantly, documenting every aspect of her life. If my suspicions were correct. There they were. Posted 3 days ago, but only now appearing in my feed due to Instagram's algorithm. Photos of my family, my entire family, on a beach that looked remarkably like the one at the Royal Lahaina Resort. My mother in a sun hat I had planned to gift her on the trip. My father on what was unmistakably the plantation course at Kapalua. Brandon and his wife toasting with cocktails at sunset. Caitlin in front of a piece of artwork that matched the description of what would be created in the workshop I had booked. The caption read, "Surprise family vacation. Best week ever. #blessed #ohana #mau life." I looked up from my phone to find both my parents watching me warily. "You went to Hawaii," I said flatly. "Last week. All of you." And that's when my mother said the words that would change everything. "Oh, you saw Caitlin's pictures." "Yes, the whole family went last week. The weather was perfect." Time seemed to stop in my parents' immaculate living room. The familiar scent of my mother's cinnamon potpourri, the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the hallway, the muted afternoon sunlight filtering through lace curtains, all these sensory details suddenly felt alien, as if I had stepped into a parallel universe where everything looked the same, but was fundamentally wrong. "The whole family went last week," I repeated, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. My mother's expression shifted as she realized what she had said. She glanced at my father, who had gone very still. "Madison," he began, using his authoritative tone that had always silenced questions in our household. "There's no need to make this into a dramatic scene." A dramatic scene. The shock was giving way to a slow-building anger I had rarely allowed myself to feel toward my parents. I spent $7,000 on a family vacation. I planned it for months. And you all went without me. Using my reservations. My mother sank onto the sofa, smoothing her pants with nervous hands. "It wasn't like that, dear. The timing just worked better for everyone last week." "Better for everyone except me," I pointed out. "The person who paid for it." "We were going to tell you," my father said, though his averted gaze suggested otherwise. "We just didn't want to upset you." A hollow laugh escaped me. "So instead, you what? Hoped I wouldn't notice when the departure date came and none of you showed up. Or that I wouldn't see Caitlin's social media posts. Your sister should have been more discreet," my mother murmured, as if that were the real problem. My hands were shaking now, and I clasped them together to hide it. "I want to understand exactly what happened. How did this even work?" "The reservations were in my name." My father cleared his throat. The resort was very accommodating when I explained the situation. Since I had all the confirmation numbers and we were keeping the same accommodations, just changing the dates, they were willing to work with us. "And what exactly was the situation you explained to them?" I asked, dreading the answer. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I may have implied that you had a work emergency, and had authorized me to make the changes." The betrayal cut deep. My own father had lied, using my name, to steal the vacation I had lovingly planned. "What about the flights?" "Those were non-refundable tickets in your names. We paid for our own flights for the new dates," my mother explained, as if this somehow mitigated their actions. "We didn't use your airfare." "How considerate," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "And did anyone, at any point, consider including me in this rescheduled family trip?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. "Madison," my mother finally said, "you're always so busy with work. We didn't think you'd be able to get away on short notice." "You didn't ask me," I pointed out. "You didn't even tell me." The front door opened then, and Caitlin walked in, freezing when she saw me standing there. Her eyes widened in recognition of the situation. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no is right," I said. "Nice pictures from Hawaii, by the way. The family looks like they had a wonderful time." Caitlin at least had the decency to look genuinely distressed. "Maddie, I'm so sorry. I told them we should call you, but..." "But what?" I demanded. "But I'm not really part of the whole family." That's not fair, my father interjected. You're overreacting. Am I? I turned to face him fully. You stole my vacation. You lied to a resort using my name. You've been avoiding me for weeks, giving me excuses and false promises, all while knowing you had already gone on the trip I paid for. Please, explain to me what an appropriate reaction would be. The sound of another car pulling into the driveway caught our attention. Moments later, Brandon walked in, stopping short when he sensed the tension. What's going on? He asked, though his uncomfortable expression suggested he already knew. Madison found out about Hawaii, my mother said quietly. Brandon sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, Maddie, it wasn't planned this way. Dad discovered there was a major client conference the week you had booked, and I couldn't miss it. Then Mom realized her garden club thing was scheduled, and it just made more sense to move the dates. And none of you thought to include me in this decision? I asked. Or even inform me afterward. We were going to reimburse you, Brandon offered, as if that was the issue. This wasn't about the money. My composure finally broke. This was supposed to be our time together, as a family. I wanted to create memories with you all, to feel connected instead of always on the outside looking in. Do you have any idea how much thought I put into planning activities each of you would enjoy? My mother stood, approaching me with outstretched hands. Sweetheart, you're not on the outside. That's all in your head. I stepped back from her reach. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, the whole family went on vacation last week, and somehow that didn't include me. The room fell silent again. In that moment, looking at their faces defensive, uncomfortable, but notably not surprised by my reaction, I realized this was not an isolated incident, but the culmination of a lifelong pattern. I had spent decades trying to earn my place in a family that had never truly made space for me. Did you all even hesitate before deciding to go without me? I asked quietly. Was there a moment when anyone said, "But what about Madison?" The silence stretched, damning in its length. Finally, Caitlin spoke up. I did, she said softly. For what it's worth, I did say we should wait and go with you as planned. And? I prompted. She looked down. Mom said you'd understand, because you're always so practical. That you'd probably prefer the money to the experience anyway. A strange calm settled over me then, the kind that comes with absolute clarity. I see. Madison, my father began, his tone conciliatory now. We made a mistake. We should have handled this differently. But you're making it sound like some grand conspiracy, when it was really just poor communication. No, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Poor communication is forgetting to mention a change of plans for dinner. This was deliberate exclusion and deception, carried out over weeks. You all made countless individual decisions to keep me in the dark while enjoying the vacation I created. I picked up my purse from where I had dropped it on the couch. I need to go. Don't leave like this, my mother pleaded. Let's talk it through. We've been talking my entire life, I replied. I've been listening to the words. It's time I started paying attention to the actions. As I walked to the door, Brandon called after me. Maddie, come on. It was just a vacation. It's not like we did it to hurt you. I paused, hand on the doorknob. That's exactly the problem, Brandon. You didn't even consider me enough to realize it would hurt me. I wasn't a factor in the equation at all. I left then, walking to my car with measured steps though everything in me wanted to run. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of my family in the window grouped together, watching me leave. The image seemed to perfectly encapsulate our relationship, them together, me apart. The 3-hour drive back to Boston passed in a blur. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply drove, the reality of what had happened sinking deeper with each mile. By the time I reached my apartment, night had fallen. I stood in my dark living room, looking out at the city lights, and felt something within me fundamentally shift. The pain was there, raw and searing, but beneath it was something else, a realization that perhaps I had been fighting for a place in a family that had never intended to make room for me. My phone had been buzzing with texts and calls during the drive, but I hadn't checked it. Now, I scrolled through the messages, variations of "you misunderstood" and "let's talk when you've calmed down" from my parents, a longer apologetic text from Caitlin, and nothing from Brandon. The final message was from my mother: "We'll pay you back for the vacation. This isn't like you to be so emotional." I set the phone down without responding. They still didn't understand that this had never been about the money. It was about belonging, about being valued, about family concepts that apparently meant something very different to me than they did to the Reynolds family. In that moment, standing alone in my apartment, I made a decision. I would no longer measure my worth by their recognition. I would no longer chase the approval of people who could so casually exclude me from the whole family. It would be a painful journey, I knew. But for the first time, I also knew it was necessary. The morning after discovering my family's betrayal, I called in sick to work for the first time in my career. The thought of sitting through meetings and analyzing market trends while my personal world imploded seemed impossible. My boss, Ellen, sounded concerned. I had built a reputation for working through everything from seasonal flu to a broken wrist, but didn't pry when I simply said I was dealing with a family emergency. The irony of that phrase wasn't lost on me. That first day passed in a fog. I moved between my bed and my couch, unable to find comfort in either place. Food held no appeal. The shows I put on for background noise failed to register. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt suddenly hollow, each carefully chosen piece of furniture, an utter reminder of how I had built my life to impress a family that had just proven they didn't truly see me. By evening, my phone had accumulated dozens of messages. My mother had progressed from defensive explanations to guilt-laden worries about my well-being. My father, characteristically brief, had sent a single text: "This reaction is excessive. Call when you're ready to discuss reasonably." Caitlin sent a tearful voice message expressing remorse, but also asking me to understand the complicated position she had been in. Brandon's lone contribution was a message suggesting I was always too sensitive, and that family stuff is never perfect. I silenced my phone and watched darkness fall over the city. The second day, I awoke with swollen eyes and a heaviness in my chest that made breathing difficult. Sleep had come in fitful bursts, haunted by dreams of running through airport terminals trying to catch up to my family, always spotting them just as they disappeared around a corner, or through a gate that closed before I could reach it. I forced myself to shower, the hot water providing momentary relief. Standing in front of my closet, I reached automatically for my work clothes before remembering I had told Ellen I would take the rest of the week off. Instead, I pulled on worn yoga pants and an oversized sweater, comfort clothes I rarely allowed myself to indulge in. The physical manifestations of my emotional state became increasingly apparent. Food tasted like ash, but my body craved sugar for quick energy, leading to a diet of sporadic ice cream and forgotten cups of tea. My usually tidy apartment accumulated small signs of neglect: dishes in the sink, mail unopened on the counter, laundry piling up in the hamper. By the third day, insomnia had left dark circles under my eyes. I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, studying my reflection, as if it might offer answers. Had there always been something fundamentally unlovable about me? Some quality that made me so easy to exclude? Memories from childhood began surfacing, moments I had dismissed or rationalized at the time, but now appeared in a new, harsher light. The family camping trip when I was 10, where I had been assigned to a separate tent while my siblings shared with our parents, because Madison likes her space. The Christmas morning when my stocking had significantly fewer treats, because Madison is so practical, she doesn't care about little trinkets. The countless dinner conversations where my attempts to share work achievements were acknowledged with brief nods before the topic returned to Brandon's or Caitlin's lives. I had spent decades telling myself these were minor oversights, not patterns of exclusion. I had convinced myself that if I just achieved more, gave more, proved my worth more decisively, I would finally secure the place in my family I had always longed for. On the fourth day, I called Dr. Mitchell, a therapist I had seen briefly after a difficult breakup 2 years prior. Her schedule was full, but upon hearing the strained quality in my voice, she offered a virtual session during her lunch break. "I feel ridiculous," I admitted after explaining what had happened. "People are dealing with real tragedies, and I'm falling apart over a vacation." Dr. Mitchell's expression was compassionate but firm. "Madison, what you're describing isn't about a vacation. It's about a profound breach of trust and a pattern of exclusion that's been normalized in your family dynamics. Your reaction isn't disproportionate. It's a natural response to having a painful truth confirmed." "What truth?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "That the role you've been assigned in your family doesn't align with the role you deserve or desire," she replied gently. "You've been trying to earn a place at a table where the seating arrangement was decided long ago." Her words penetrated the numbness I had been cultivating. Tears that had been stubbornly refusing to fall finally came, streaming down my face in hot, silent rivulets. "I don't know how to stop wanting their approval," I confessed, voice breaking. "I've built my entire life around being good enough, responsible enough, successful enough. If I'm not the daughter who finally earns their recognition, who am I?" "That," Dr. Mitchell said softly, "is exactly the question you now have the opportunity to answer for yourself." That evening, as I was staring blankly at my untouched dinner, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Rachel standing in the hallway, loaded down with bags. I hesitated, not sure I was ready for company, but she rang again, more insistently. "I know you're in there, Maddie," she called. I brought reinforcements: wine, ice cream, face masks, and terrible romantic comedies. "Let me in or I'm camping outside your door." I opened the door, and Rachel took one look at my face before setting down her bags and pulling me into a tight hug. The simple human contact broke something in me, and I found myself sobbing against her shoulder, releasing days of pent-up emotion. "I've got you," she murmured, rubbing circles on my back. "Let it out." Later, sprawled on my couch with pints of premium ice cream and glasses of Cabernet, I recounted the full story. Rachel listened without interruption, her expressive face shifting from shock to outrage on my behalf. "I knew your family was self-absorbed," she said when I finished, "but this is next-level exclusion. They literally went on your vacation without you. That's not normal family dysfunction, Maddie. That's deliberate cruelty. The worst part is they don't even see it that way," I said, stabbing at my mint chocolate chip. "They think I'm overreacting. Like I should just accept being an afterthought in my own family." Rachel set down her wine glass with purpose. "Listen to me. I've known you for 12 years. You are the most generous, loyal, thoughtful person in my life. You remember my mother's birthday every year. You helped me move 3 times without complaint. You organized that surprise party for my promotion even though you were swamped with your own work. Anyone would be lucky to have you as family, and the fact that your biological relatives don't recognize that says everything about them and nothing about you." Her fierce defense pierced through the fog of self-doubt that had enveloped me. "I think I needed to hear that," I admitted. "I'll repeat it as often as necessary," she promised. Now, we're going to watch people fall in love in improbable circumstances, apply green goo to our faces, and make a plan for moving forward. Because you will move forward, Maddie. And I'll be right beside you every step of the way. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt a small spark of something other than pain, the faintest flicker of possibility, that perhaps I could rebuild my sense of self and worth outside the constraints of my family's perception. The following days brought gradual, subtle shifts. I began forcing myself to eat regular meals, even when I had no appetite. I cleaned my apartment, opened the blinds to let in natural light, and established a simple routine of morning walks along the Charles River. The physical movement helped clear my head, and the sight of the water flowing steadily onward regardless of obstacles seemed symbolically significant. A week after the discovery, I returned to work. The familiar environment and clearly defined expectations provided a welcome structure. Ellen checked in briefly, accepting my vague explanation of family issues, without pressing for details, but ensuring I knew the firm's mental health resources were available if needed. Immersing myself in work provided temporary reprieves from the emotional turmoil, but evenings remained difficult. The silence of my apartment seemed to amplify the thoughts I had been pushing away during business hours. I found myself obsessively replaying memories, searching for signs I should have recognized sooner, wondering how I could have been so blind to my family's true regard for me. During our second emergency therapy session, Dr. Mitchell introduced an exercise that proved unexpectedly helpful. I want you to write down every message you received, explicitly or implicitly, about your role in the family, she instructed. Then we'll examine each one critically. The list came easily, flowing from a lifetime of accumulated hurts. I am valued for what I provide, not who I am. My achievements are expected, not celebrated. My needs are secondary to everyone else's. I must continually prove my worth. I am not automatically included in family. My feelings are excessive if they are inconvenient for others. Looking at these beliefs in black and white was both painful and clarifying. Dr. Mitchell guided me through questioning each one, examining the evidence supporting and contradicting them, and considering alternative perspectives. These are not objective truths, Madison, she emphasized. These are interpretations you've formed based on painful experiences. They've been reinforced over time, but that doesn't make them immutable facts about your worth or lovability. They feel like facts, I admitted. Especially after what just happened. I understand, she nodded. And what happened was real and hurtful. But the conclusion that you are somehow fundamentally unworthy of inclusion or consideration, that's an interpretation that isn't serving you. Slowly, painfully, I began the process of separating my sense of self from my family's treatment of me. It wasn't a linear journey. Some days I felt stronger, more resolved in my determination to build a life based on healthier relationships and self-validation. Other days, the familiar pull of wanting their approval would resurface, and I would find myself composing emails I never sent, imagining conversations where they finally understood the depth of their betrayal and sought genuine reconciliation. 3 weeks after the discovery, my parents announced they were coming to Boston to sort things out. I panicked, not feeling ready for a face-to-face confrontation, and called Dr. Mitchell for an emergency consultation. You have options, she reminded me. You can agree to see them on your terms, in a neutral location, with clear time boundaries. You can postpone until you feel more prepared. Or you can decline entirely. There is no obligation to engage before you're ready. Her words were empowering. For the first time, I recognized that I had a choice in how and when I interacted with my family. This realization was both terrifying and liberating. After careful consideration, I texted my parents that I wasn't ready to meet, but would contact them when I was. My father responded with a terse, "This is ridiculous. while my mother sent a long message about family obligation and forgiveness. I read their responses, acknowledged the familiar guilt and doubt they triggered, but did not reply. That evening, staring out at the city lights from my living room window, I realized something had shifted within me. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had changed form. What had begun as a raw, bleeding wound was slowly transforming into something else, a catalyst for growth, a clarifying lens through which I could finally see the truth of my family dynamics, without the distortion of wishful thinking. I picked up my phone and texted Rachel. I think I'm ready to start figuring out who I am outside of being the Reynolds family disappointment. Her response came instantly. I've been waiting for this text. And for the record, you've never been a disappointment to anyone who truly knows you. For the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine smile form. The road ahead would be challenging, requiring me to dismantle and rebuild fundamental aspects of my self-concept. But for the first time, I could envision a future where my worth wasn't determined by my family's validation, a future where I could belong, fully and authentically, to myself. 1 month after discovering my family's betrayal, I woke up with an unexpected sense of clarity. The hurt remained, a dull ache rather than the sharp pain of those first days, but alongside it had grown a determination to stop living in limbo. I needed resolution, not necessarily reconciliation, but acknowledgement of the truth, whatever that might mean for our relationship moving forward. After my morning walk and a consultation with Dr. Mitchell, I made my decision. I texted my parents. I'll be driving to Connecticut for Sunday dinner tomorrow. I'd like everyone to be there. We need to talk. My mother's response was immediate and effusive, filled with expressions of relief and assurances that they had been so worried about me. My father's reply was characteristically brief, "We'll be here." Caitlin sent a separate message. "I'm nervous, but glad you're coming. I've missed you." Brandon didn't respond at all. That night, I prepared methodically, as if for a crucial business negotiation. I wrote down the key points I wanted to address, anticipating their likely responses based on patterns I had observed throughout my life, but had never fully acknowledged. Dr. Mitchell had emphasized the importance of identifying my boundaries and desired outcomes beforehand, rather than being drawn into familiar dynamics that would leave me feeling unheard and invalidated. Remember, she had advised, you cannot control their responses. You can only control how you express yourself and what boundaries you maintain. The 3-hour drive to Connecticut the next day gave me time to rehearse what I wanted to say, but also stirred anxiety that threatened to undermine my resolve. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, my hands were trembling slightly on the steering wheel. I noticed Brandon's SUV and Caitlin's compact car already parked in front of the house. They were all waiting in the living room when I entered, my parents seated together on the sofa, Brandon in my father's leather armchair, and Caitlin perched nervously on the window seat. The scene was so familiar, yet everything had changed. Madison, my mother, rose, arms outstretched for a hug that I sidestepped as naturally as possible. "Let's sit down," I suggested, choosing a straight-backed chair that faced the rest of them. I didn't come for dinner, despite what the text implied. I came to talk about what happened and where we go from here. My father cleared his throat. "Madison, we understand you are upset about the vacation situation. We should have handled it differently. But it's been a month of this silence. In any normal family, this would have blown over by now." The phrase, "any normal family," sparked something in me, a recognition of how often they had used normality as a bludgeon to dismiss my feelings. "That's exactly what I want to discuss," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "This isn't about a vacation. It's about a pattern that's existed my entire life, one where I am consistently treated as separate from the family, where my efforts to connect are minimized, and where my feelings are dismissed as excessive or abnormal when they're inconvenient for everyone else." The room fell silent. Caitlin stared at her hands, Brandon shifted uncomfortably, and my parents exchanged a glance I had seen countless times, the one that communicated their united front against whatever I was presenting. "That's simply not true," my mother finally said, her tone wounded. "We've always treated all our children equally. If anything, you've been the one who distanced yourself with your focus on your career and life in Boston." "Mom," Caitlin interjected softly, "that's not really fair. Maddie has always made more effort to stay connected than any of us." My mother looked betrayed by this unexpected alliance. "Caitlin, you know how much we value family togetherness." Madison chose to move away. "I moved 3 hours away for a career opportunity," I pointed out. "Brandon lives 20 minutes from you and sees you twice a month at most. Yet somehow I'm the one labeled as distant, because I can't make it to every impromptu family gathering." Brandon straightened defensively. "Some of us have children and responsibilities here. It's different." "Different," I repeated. "That word comes up a lot in how you all relate to me. My achievements are acknowledged differently. My gifts are received differently. My absence is interpreted differently. And apparently, my inclusion in family events is considered optional." My father leaned forward, assuming his problem-solver posture. "Madison, you're painting us as villains based on a series of misunderstandings and perceived slights. We made one mistake with the vacation timing." "You stole my vacation," I interrupted, the words precise and calm. "You contacted a resort using my name, changed my reservations without my knowledge, excluded me entirely, and then hid it from me for weeks while I continued planning what I thought was our upcoming trip together. That wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate series of choices, made by each of you individually and collectively." The bluntness of this assessment landed heavily in the room. For perhaps the first time, I wasn't softening my truth to protect their feelings or preserve family harmony. "We were going to pay you back," my father said, his tone suggesting this should resolve everything. "I've never once mentioned the money," I replied. "Not in any conversation about this. Because this has never been about money. It was about creating an experience together. About feeling like I belonged in this family after a lifetime of subtle and not so subtle messages that I don't quite fit." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "How can you say such hurtful things? Of course you belong in this family. You're our daughter." "Being genetically related doesn't automatically create belonging," I said gently. "Belonging is created through actions that demonstrate care, consideration, and inclusion. When was the last time any of you showed genuine interest in my life? When have my achievements been celebrated rather than noted in passing? When have my feelings been treated as valid rather than inconvenient?" Brandon stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're acting like we've abused you or something. So we went on a vacation without you. So what? Families disappoint each other sometimes. You don't see me throwing a month-long tantrum when things don't go my way." I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and suddenly saw with perfect clarity how little he understood me. "This isn't a tantrum, Brandon. It's a boundary. For the first time in my life, I'm refusing to accept being treated as an afterthought by the people who should care about me most." Caitlin moved to sit closer to me, though she maintained a respectful distance. "Maddie, I knew what we did was wrong. I felt sick about it the whole time we were there. I should have stood up more strongly, or at least called you directly." Her acknowledgement, though imperfect, was the first genuine recognition of wrongdoing I had received. "Thank you for saying that, Caitlin." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "We never meant to hurt you, Madison. We love you. You've always been our responsible one, our rock. Maybe we've taken that for granted sometimes, but it was never intentional exclusion. The phrase, "our responsible one," hit me with particular force, the role I had been assigned without my consent, a box that defined and confined me. Whether it was intentional or not doesn't change the impact, I explained. And the impact has been a lifetime of feeling like I have to earn my place in this family while everyone else's is guaranteed. The vacation was just the most obvious manifestation of a dynamic that's always existed. My father, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "What exactly do you want from us, Madison?" Endless apologies. Some kind of formal family therapy. What will it take to move past this? It was the question I had been preparing for, the reason I had made the drive to Connecticut. I want acknowledgement, not just of the vacation incident, but of the pattern it represents. I want recognition that my feelings are valid, not excessive or dramatic. And moving forward, I want a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine inclusion, not one where I'm perpetually trying to earn a place at the table. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken resistance. My father's expression had hardened, my mother looked bewildered, and Brandon was shaking his head slightly. Only Caitlin seemed to be genuinely absorbing my words. If that's not possible, I continued, then I need to redefine what family means in my life. I need to prioritize relationships that are nurturing and reciprocal, even if they're not with the people I share DNA with. You would cut us off over this? My mother's voice was incredulous. I'm not threatening to cut anyone off, I clarified. I'm stating what I need to have a healthy relationship. Whether that's possible is up to all of us. Brandon muttered something under his breath and walked out of the room. My father looked after him but remained seated, his expression unreadable. I don't understand when you became so sensitive, my mother said, her tone suggesting this was a character flaw rather than a normal human quality. You used to be so much stronger. The irony of this statement wasn't lost on me. Mom, setting boundaries isn't weakness. It's actually the strongest thing I've ever done. We talked for another hour, circling the same points without meaningful resolution. My parents acknowledged that the vacation situation had been handled poorly, but stopped short of recognizing the deeper pattern I was highlighting. Caitlin made sincere, but halting attempts to validate my perspective, clearly torn between loyalty to our parents and recognition of the truth in my words. Brandon returned briefly, only to announce he needed to get home to his family, departing with a stiff nod in my direction. As the conversation wound down, I felt simultaneously exhausted and lighter, as if I had set down a burden I had been carrying for decades. I hadn't received the full acknowledgement I had hoped for, but I had spoken my truth without minimizing it to make others comfortable, a significant step in its own right. As I prepared to leave, my mother followed me to the door, catching my arm gently. "Madison, please don't distance yourself from us. We can work through this." I looked at the woman who had raised me, seeing both the mother I loved and the parent who had consistently failed to see me fully. "I hope we can. But it will require real change, not just waiting for me to fall back into old patterns." "We're your family," she said, as if this alone should resolve everything. Yes, I agreed. But that's not the only factor in determining what our relationship looks like moving forward. The drive back to Boston was quieter than the journey there, filled with a strange mixture of disappointment and liberation. The confrontation hadn't produced the clear resolution I had hoped for, but it had confirmed what I needed to know. The dynamic I had identified was real, not imagined, and unlikely to change without significant effort from all involved. As I crossed the state line back into Massachusetts, I felt something unexpected, a sense of returning home, to a life I had built for myself, on my terms. For the first time, I could envision a future defined by what I chose to include, rather than what I had been denied. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "How did it go? Need company tonight?" I pulled over at a rest stop to respond. It went about as expected. They are not ready to see it. But I am. And that's what matters. Rain check on company needs some time to process. Brunch tomorrow. Her reply was immediate, absolutely. Proud of you, Maddie. As I continued toward Boston, the setting sun cast long shadows across the highway. Something had ended today, but something else had begun, a journey toward authenticity that would require courage and persistence, but promised a freedom I had never allowed myself to imagine. 2 months after the confrontation with my family, I found myself standing at Logan International Airport, a one-way ticket to Costa Rica in hand. The decision to use my accumulated vacation time for a solo trip had emerged from a therapy session with Dr. Mitchell, who had suggested that creating new experiences might help disrupt the cycle of rumination I was still struggling with. You planned a trip meant to create meaningful memories, she had pointed out. There's no reason you can't still have that experience, even if the participants have changed. The idea had resonated immediately. I had spent hours researching sustainable eco-lodges and meaningful volunteer opportunities, designing an itinerary that balanced adventure, relaxation, and personal growth. Unlike the Hawaiian vacation I had planned for my family, this journey was crafted entirely around my own interests and desires, a novel concept for someone who had spent a lifetime prioritizing others' needs. The 2 weeks in Costa Rica proved transformative in ways I couldn't have anticipated. I stayed at a small eco-lodge nestled between the rainforest and the Pacific Ocean, where the absence of constant connectivity forced me to be present in a way I rarely allowed myself. Mornings were spent volunteering at a local sea turtle conservation project, afternoons exploring waterfalls or practicing yoga on the beach, and evenings connecting with fellow travelers over fresh seafood and local beer. It was during these evening conversations that I experienced an unexpected breakthrough. As I shared abbreviated versions of my family situation with people who knew nothing about me, their reactions consistently reflected shock and validation of my feelings. A British woman in her 60s had looked at me over her glass of wine and said simply, "Darling, that's not normal family dysfunction. That's exceptional selfishness." A Canadian couple exchanged glances before the husband commented, "We have 3 adult children, and I can't imagine excluding any of them from a family trip, let alone one they had paid for." These casual validations from strangers helped solidify what Dr. Mitchell had been trying to help me see, that my perception of the situation wasn't distorted by oversensitivity, but rather had been clouded by years of normalized mistreatment. On my 10th day in Costa Rica, I met Elena, a 68-year-old retired teacher from Oregon who was traveling solo after her husband's death. We connected instantly over early morning coffee on the lodge's veranda, watching scarlet macaws fly between saber trees. When I eventually shared aspects of my family situation, her response was unlike any other. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I experienced something similar with my birth family. For years, I tried to earn my place by being the perfect daughter, the reliable sister, the generous aunt. It took me until my 40s to realize that some tables aren't worth sitting at, no matter how beautifully they're set." "How did you move forward?" I asked, captivated by her calm wisdom. Elena smiled. "I built my own table. Filled it with people who wanted me there just as I am. My husband, our friends, students who became like children to us, neighbors who became family. Over time, I maintained contact with my birth family, but without the desperate need for their validation. Some relationships improved once I stopped needing more than they could give. Others remained distant. But the hole in my heart was filled by the family I chose." Her words resonated deeply, offering a vision of a future I had only begun to imagine for myself. The concept of building my own table, creating a chosen family based on mutual respect and genuine connection, felt both terrifying and exhilarating. During my final days in Costa Rica, I hiked to a remote waterfall with a small group from the lodge. The path was challenging, muddy from recent rains and steep in sections that required careful navigation. 2 hours into the hike, I slipped on a moss-covered rock, twisting my ankle painfully. As I sat catching my breath, assessing the injury, my hiking companions immediately rallied around me, Elena offering her walking stick, a young German doctor in the group examining my ankle, others adjusting the hike plan without complaint to accommodate my slower pace. The contrast between this immediate, unquestioning support from virtual strangers and my family's consistent pattern of exclusion struck me profoundly. These people had known me for days, not decades, yet showed more consideration than those who shared my blood. The realization was both painful and liberating, concrete evidence that the problem wasn't my inherent unworthiness, but rather the specific dynamic of my family relationships. When I returned to Boston, tanned and clearer-eyed than I had been in months, I found an email from my mother waiting. Unlike her previous messages, which had vacillated between guilt-inducing pleas and defensive justifications, this one seemed different from the opening line. Dear Madison, I've been doing a lot of thinking since your visit. I didn't want to interrupt your trip, but I need to tell you that I've started seeing a therapist myself. Some of what you said has been haunting me, especially about feeling like you had to earn your place in our family. I'm not sure I fully understand yet, but I want to. If you're willing, I'd like to talk, just the two of us. I read the message several times, wary of premature hope, but noting the absence of the usual emotional manipulation. After consulting with Dr. Mitchell, I agreed to meet my mother at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between Boston and Connecticut. The meeting was awkward at first, both of us navigating unfamiliar territory without our established scripts. But as my mother hesitantly shared her conversations with her therapist, I glimpsed something I had rarely seen before: the willingness to consider that her perspective might be limited, that her intentions, however good, didn't negate the impact of her actions. I always thought being a good mother meant treating all my children the same, she admitted, stirring her tea absently. But my therapist suggested that might not be true, that being equitable doesn't always mean being identical in approach. That's insightful, I acknowledged, surprised by this shift in her thinking. She also asked me to consider why we went ahead with the Hawaii trip without you, my mother continued, her voice quieter. It wasn't a comfortable conversation. I had to face some unflattering truths about myself, about how I've sometimes resented your independence, your ability to build a life that doesn't revolve around family the way mine has. This admission, the first real acknowledgement of the underlying dynamic, left me momentarily speechless. I'm not saying this to excuse what happened, she added quickly. Just trying to understand it myself. Your father and Brandon aren't where I am with this yet. But I wanted you to know I'm trying to hear what you've been saying. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a beginning, a small crack in the wall of denial that had characterized our family system. We agreed to continue individual therapy and consider the possibility of joint sessions in the future, though I made it clear that my relationship with my father and Brandon would develop at its own pace, if at all. As spring turned to summer, subtle shifts continued. Caitlin visited Boston for a weekend, and our time together felt different, more balanced and authentic than our previous interactions. She shared her own frustrations with family dynamics, and acknowledged how differently I had been treated over the years. I think I always knew something was off, she confessed as we walked along the Charles River. But it was easier to go along with it than challenge the whole system. I'm sorry, Maddie. I should have been a better sister. We were all playing the roles we were assigned, I replied, realizing the truth of this as I said it. I'm just trying to write a new script now. My father remained distant, occasionally joining brief video calls, but making no substantive efforts toward reconciliation. Brandon sent a generic birthday card with a gift certificate to a department store, his version of an olive branch, though notably absent of any acknowledgement of the underlying issues. As my 33rd birthday approached, Rachel organized a celebration that unintentionally highlighted how much had changed in a year. The gathering included colleagues who had become friends, neighbors from my building, members of my book club, and even Dr. Mitchell, who had transitioned from therapist to mentor, as I had graduated from regular sessions to occasional check-ins. Looking around my apartment, filled with people who chose to be there, who valued me without qualification, I realized I had begun building the table Elena had described, creating a chosen family based on mutual respect and genuine connection. The evening was coming to a close when my phone chimed with a text from my mother, "Thinking of you on your birthday. Your father and I were looking at old photos today, and found this one. Thought you might like to have it." The attached image showed a much younger me, perhaps 7 or 8, sitting on our old backyard swing set. Unlike most family photos, where I was posed stiffly or partially obscured, this one captured a moment of pure joy, head thrown back in laughter, pigtails flying, completely unself-conscious. The photo triggered a memory I had long forgotten, a rare day when my father had spent hours pushing me on that swing, matching my requests to go higher, higher, with gentle increases that made me feel simultaneously thrilled and safe. It had been a perfect afternoon, one where I had felt fully seen and cherished. The text didn't erase the hurt or magically resolve our complicated relationship, but it suggested something I hadn't allowed myself to consider, that perhaps beneath the dysfunction and hurtful patterns, there had also been moments of genuine connection and love. That the story of my family, like most human stories, contained contradictions and complexities rather than absolute truths. As my guests departed and I prepared for bed, I found myself returning to that photo, studying my own uninhibited smile. The child in that swing didn't yet know about family vacations in Hawaii, or the pain of exclusion. She simply knew the joy of flying through the air, secure in the knowledge that someone who loved her would make sure she didn't fall. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge that both realities could exist simultaneously, the hurt of being excluded and the memory of being cherished, the necessity of establishing boundaries and the possibility of conditional reconciliation, the importance of my birth family and the value of my chosen one. 6 months after discovering my family's betrayal, I found myself sitting at my desk at Meridian Financial, staring at an email containing an unexpected job offer from a prestigious firm in San Francisco. The position aligned perfectly with my interest in sustainable investing and came with substantial benefits and growth potential. Under normal circumstances, I would have immediately called my parents to discuss such a significant opportunity. Instead, I called Rachel, then consulted with my mentor at the firm, and finally discussed it with Dr. Mitchell. I considered how the move would affect the relationships I had been nurturing in Boston, weighed the professional advantages against the personal disruption, and reflected on what I truly wanted for my future, all without once considering how my decision would be perceived by my family. When I finally did share the news with my mother during our now regular Sunday phone calls, her response surprised me. "That sounds like an amazing opportunity, Madison. I know we'd see you even less, but you have to make decisions based on what's right for your life, not on what would be convenient for us." The acknowledgement that my life was my own to direct felt like the culmination of a journey that had begun with a devastating discovery, but had led to an unexpected liberation. I accepted the San Francisco position, approaching the cross-country move as an adventure rather than an escape. My mother and Caitlin helped me pack, spending a weekend in Boston that felt more comfortable than any family interaction I could remember. My father called to awkwardly offer financial assistance with moving expenses, his love language, though I gently declined. Brandon remained peripheral.